Oh. Hey, ladies and gentlemen. Well, as Duncan's just said, I published a book called Mysterious Australia. And I wrote it really to show the average Australian that we have just as many wonderful unexplained phenomena, mysteries, mysterious archaeological evidence, and whatever in this country as they have overseas. All the literature over the years has been on what's found in America or Europe, Stonehenge, Easter Island, and Infinitum, Loch Ness monsters, Bigfoot. But how many people have heard of the Australian Bigfoot, the Yowie, or the Australian Nessie, the Hawkesbury River monster, among other things? I've actually spent a lifetime investigating unknown animals in this country. And my wife, Heather, and I go all over the country regularly looking for things. And we're just about to make our 4th field expedition to New Zealand in search of evidence of pre-Maori civilization contacts. While I'm there, I'm to be shown pyramidal structures and other megalithic monuments by a group of Maori Tohungas, and other people have found things which have reported to me. We'll also be searching for sighting reports of the moa. And the moa, well, in this case, a small scrub moa. The larger ones are extinct. And also the so-called moihau, a man-like creature in Maori folklore which early European settlers claim to have sighted. And of course the taniwha, the Maori plesiosaur type sea monsters that have been reported for generations there. They're similar creatures in New Guinea. And when you compare all the descriptions of our Aboriginal people of the plesiosaur type creatures, the woolly wonk as they call them in the Hawkesbury River, with the New Zealand taniwha, the Korea of New Guinea, you find they're all one and the same creature. I think this is better. And this is the same with our moihau man-beast in New Zealand. Now, how would they get a man-like creature similar to our yowie in New Zealand? Well, this is because there was a land bridge during early Ice Age times from mainland Asia going through what is now the islands of Southeast Asia, joining New Guinea, Australia, and an offshoot of that went down through the islands of the West Pacific into New Zealand. Maori folklore talks about the lost land of Wangaroa, and that the various tribes on the different islands used to walk to visit one another rather than take boats. And the sea rose gradually and submerged this great landmass. Here we perhaps have moved. But in any case, I believe this land bridge was used in early Pleistocene times by the most primitive hominids to migrate on foot gradually down into Australia and down into New Zealand, because there have been found fossilised footprints of both giant-sized and normal-sized hominids similar to those found in Australia. There are also dawn tools and even giant or stone megatools similar to those found in Australia, which I believe could only have been left there by people who were able to enter the country on foot at a very remote period. And I'll be investigating reports of this unknown Stone Age history of New Zealand while I'm there. I've spent a lifetime, as I say, and in this I've found an enormous collection of different relics and rock inscriptions, footprints of various animals like the Tasmanian tiger. And people often ask me why I find these things. How do we find them? I seem to have a spirit guide, perhaps. I don't know, but I'll be driving on the road and I'll say, pull up, there's something over there in the bush. And I'll go over there and I might come back with a rare butterfly, moth, beetle. It might be a fossil. It might be I find a fossil footprint, or I might find a rock inscription. Haven't caught a yowie yet. But the fact is, I always come back to the car with something. So it's uncanny. But I seem to have, as I say, someone or something guiding me to all these discoveries. Now, I have come in for a lot of criticism over the years, and lately it's gotten really violent, you might say, with certain academic people who are trying to discredit me because I'm stepping on toes. I'm saying, for example, that the Australian Aborigines were not the first Stone Age inhabitants of Australia. That is not politically correct. Unfortunately, I have found evidence which suggests that this is so, that we have a Stone Age history comparable to that of mainland Asia, perhaps even Africa. Now, Australia had been known to all the ancient civilizations. Why? They all have traditions in ancient Greece, Rome, Egypt, Sumeria, even in the Amerindian cultures of a vast continent in the southern hemisphere, with variations, basically the motherland, the land where the first men and women arose. The Sumerians said the first people who came up to Sumeria came up from a southern land to establish the civilization of Ur. And I believe I have found that civilization because I believe that there is a lost megalithic civilization in Australia and that it predates any other. The relics I've found here are much older than anything in Europe. For example, Stonehenge is only 5,000 years old. As you go back through Eastern Europe into Asia, you find the megaliths getting older, and into Southeast Asia, and then down into New Guinea where they're about 10,000 or so years old. But in Australia, they're over 15, maybe 20,000 years old. Now, I believe that these people may have even started to develop metallurgy by the time they were migrating out of Australia. Many stayed here, of course. And those that left here gradually spread up into Asia and across into Europe, where they're called Cro-Magnon man. Now, this early Stone Age people, who were they? We see here, and you might have seen earlier, a skull, two skulls. The larger of the two is this one. It's what we call an endocast, as is the next one followed. The endocasts are caused by mud, filling skulls, dinosaur, man, whatever, and fossilising. Sometimes the bone material just disintegrates and falls away, or it becomes mineralised with the rest of it. According to Australian Museum findings years ago, endocasts can be up to 250,000 years old. These two skulls are of two distinct racial types. The larger one is what we call the Solo man, and the smaller one, Wajak man. Homo erectus entered Australia at some stage, according to Dr. Jeremy Chirps of Oxford University, an anthropologist, and evolved into modern man here, or the Solo man as he's called. At a later date, the Wajaks, an offshoot of the Peking group, came down here, found the Solo people here, and interbred with them to produce the Australian Aborigine by about 60,000 or so years ago. Now, I believe it was the Solo people, the first modern man, the earliest we know, who created the Australian megalithic culture and spread it out across the earth together with its associated agricultural science, or astronomically associated agricultural science, and certainly the beginnings of religion in the form of the Earth Mother and Sky Father cults. Now, here we have one of my latest discoveries from Bendigo, an endocast of a Homo erectus type skull. Given that it's been crushed by geological pressure, you can see pressure marks in it. That's a front showing a pointed sagittal crest, but the skull was out a little more. Now, the next slide should show the sagittal crest looking down on it, and in profile we have, well, we saw a profile shot earlier. Here it is in that slide. You would have seen the three skull types. This is what they are when they're reconstructed. Admittedly, the others are distorted through geological pressures in the ground, but I believe they're well over 250,000 years old. The top one, Solo man, with the hasn't got the same amount of receding forehead as the more primitive Wajak people, who are closer to Java man and Peking man and Indian. And down here, the Bendigo man with the missing section. He should, if the brow ridges were there, have been a Homo erectus skull. In fact, the Yowie supposed to have a pointed sagittal crest, and all the other Bigfoot-type creatures worldwide. I believe they evolved in Central Asia and spread out over the earth, over those land bridges, at a very early period, possible descendants of the Gigantopithecus, the South China giant, a 3-metre tall, upright walking man-like ape. Aboriginal tradition speaks of giant hominids, as well as other non-Aboriginal normal-sized races having inhabited here, and they have traditions of battles with them, as we can see from my drawing. This could have happened here, could have happened anywhere in Australia. In the Bathurst area, almost 30 years ago, I found giant-sized megatools, a 36-pound stone club I've got my hand on. Next, we have the same club and a 25-pound hand axe against an Aboriginal stone club and Aboriginal hand axe. Not the sort of chap you'd want to meet on a dark night. And this is the biggest one I found yet. A 20-kilogram, 40-pound weight black basalt chopper from Timor in the New England area. And the next slide will show a close-up of the flaking along the bottom. Now, to have used such implements, the creatures that used these would have had to have been beings of immense stature and strength. And we do have fossil footprints in many parts of Australia. And this is why I've been attacked, because I'm finding evidence that's not supposed to exist. This is a 62 centimetre long by 36 across the toes and 10 centimetre deep in solid mudstone from the Canadian National Park. I found an extensive fossil mudstone site which was once a mud flat, and according to geologists, the volcanic eruptions up there ended 3 million years ago at the end of the Pliocene. So they're late Pliocene hominids. Now, for that to happen, for these footprints to have been laid there, volcanic ashes had to have covered them. So they're not recent. They have been covered by volcanic eruptions. If the scientists are right, they didn't know about these footprints when I was told about the geology of the area. Otherwise, they wouldn't have told me anything. The fact is, these footprints, this is a 52 centimetre by 25 across the toes track. It's within 7 feet of the other. And the next footprint is about the same size. It looks almost more ape-like. They're separate individuals. Now, in the same area, I found something that I thought only Mary Leakey would be able to find in Africa. A fossil trackway of a normal-sized hominid, about 33 centimetres long, given distortion, 16 centimetres wide. The deepest tracks are 12 centimetres in the mud, and others are about 6. Now, these footprints are of a creature wading through thick mud, and you can see the mud caving on both sides, but it's been covered soon after by ash, which has baked it hard before it could disappear. And the best specimen is this one down here. Actually goes about 6 centimetres into the rock, but shows very interesting heel formation. Next slide. Now, this creature on stage is actually bending around at an angle because of the shape of the tracks, and it's looking from one side to the other, I believe. So possibly watching out for the ash that's coming behind. Hominids in Australia, 3 million years before the Aborigines, 3 million years before us. I say they were probably here earlier. The fact is, the scientific community is not prepared for this, and I will go on being attacked, and they've done everything they can to prevent my findings from getting into the media. And I can't even get an article published lately without some editor ringing up and saying, have you any degrees? Dr. So-and-so has criticised your findings. If you're only an amateur, well, so you don't get it published. Amateurs don't know anything. This is the sort of creatures I believe in Australia. It's not impossible that something like Australopithecus might have reached here. Maybe Ramapithecus, a smaller hominid that might have been an ancestor of the Australopithecines. But hominids like this, the yowie, for example, is basically of this structure. Now, next slide. We have more footprints from Katoomba. This creature was, well, there's two actually. There's only 2 surviving left feet here of a creature running up an embankment. There's a layer of fossilised river gravels underneath. So it was coming out of a watercourse, running up an embankment, and next to it, you'll see the next slide shows life here next to these tracks, and what's this for? We have this semi-giant footprint over here, a different individual, much bigger. Next slide. And so we've got maybe a larger creature and his smaller female fleeing from a volcanic eruption at the base of a 50-foot tall cliff of intermittent several feet of fossil soil and basalt from lava flows, and I'd be kind to give it 1 million years. Up in the Caroline Range, this is the sort of country you have in the eastern mountain ranges, home of the supposed yowie, the Tasmanian tiger, the Australian panther, a giant marsupial cat, and at some stage in the late Pliocene, volcanic eruptions covered a mud flat, and it solidified. wind erosion, water, and everything, carved out a gully, which carved out a long cave, I'd say, underneath this cliff, and the pressure cracked about a dozen foot of this rock, and it fell down into a crevasse, like we see here. Now, here's how they're standing next to a couple of footprints. This one's very large. Now, next to it, you've got a 41 centimetre long handprint, and it was a left hand. We have here a giant footprint, which is about the 62 centimetre mark. The next one, there's about 90 footprints in this set, but I'm not showing them all today. There's the handprint. Imagine being slapped with that. That's a left hand. Oh, sorry, a right hand. Yeah. This fellow is incomplete. But if he had been, he'd be approximately 120 centimetres in length. How tall was he? The other fellow, the basic footprints length of the others are about 62 centimetres, and this would make him about 4 metres tall. So, hence the giant size artefacts. Now, moving on, we have another mystery. We have my Australian lost civilization. Now, I believe I have the name for this, and it's going to be revealed in my next book, which I'm writing for Nexus. It will be a book which will precede another, actually, on the Australian mystery civilization. The one I'm doing at the moment concerns the movements of ancient civilizations in the Australian region. This is what we find all over Australia. Stone lines. This one goes for a couple of kilometres from north to south. This is in the Bathurst area. Next. The slides actually show stones up to 6 feet apart. Some of them go, you might get a dozen at 6 feet, and another few that are at odd numbers, and another lot that are a dozen feet apart, or so on. And there's various numbers, and they tend to have a mathematical precision about them. There's something in this that's beyond me. I'm no mathematician. Now, we also have standing stones. This is all on the same line as the structures you get in Europe, Asia, but the ones in Australia are more primitive. We're looking at the crude beginnings of the megalithic civilization that spread from Australia up into Asia. Now, here's 6 foot long by 4 foot by 3 foot blocks of stone at the base of that 19 foot stone. Now, it's been deliberately put there. It's one of a number of these stones in this area, which covers about 10 square miles. So it's one massive temple of the stars. Like all megalithic sites all over the world, you have libation bowls at the end of every stone line. And here's one here, 5 foot deep, a couple of feet wide, and about almost 5 feet in length. That's solid granite. How did they carve into that? Next. 21 foot high with an altar stone at the base. It's in the same area. There's the altar stone. And the next slide, we have another alignment 2 miles away, going for a couple of kilometres like the other one, north to south again, same principle, 6 foot, 6 foot, 6 foot, 10 foot, 10 foot, 13 foot or 14 foot apart, several, each measurement. And they end at that hill far in. Now, these stones conduct natural electricity, as you know. There's an energy going through these, and on wet days or dull days, misty days, in the Bathurst area, if you walk between these, sometimes you get an electric shock. I stood between those 2 stones on a really cold winter day, put my hand on both and just casually walking through and got a shock that made me go back to the farm we were staying at and lay down for the rest of the day. I wrote to Janet and Colin Ward in England, who have written books on this, and they say the same principle is worldwide. We have at each of these sites carved stone heads, 6 to 8 foot tall, high forehead, eyes, nose and mouth towards the base. Next stone. We have, once again, that was a male figure. This looks more female, and I've unfortunately put it back to the front. I'll never get used to carousels. Eyes, nose and mouth towards the base. Very badly weathered. These things are at least 20,000 years old. I'd be kind, perhaps, to say that. Here we have what I've called the Gate of the Moon. It's 40-something foot across, and that gap in the centre is 8 foot. And look at the massive stones, 8 to 10 tonnes apiece. Now, next stone slide. We have a slide view, and next one, I've actually cut a lot out here. This should be to this side, actually. I'm sorry about this. But we have a stone right up against one of the big ones, and it's on the northern side. It faces north-south. And This one faces east. Now next slide will show another 6 foot away and another 120 foot away in a direct line with the moon when it rises the last day of April. Next to it is an altar stone. In fact, you can see the others up in the distance there, but altars always appear at the most important standing stones and the like. And we have another one here. This is down in the Riverina area towards Griffith, and we have a 150-yard alignment. Now we have the end stone, about 40 or so there'll be about 35 stones involved in it. And at the end, we have some interesting figures. We've got a couple of notch-type carvings here. We've got a serpent, and we have a phallic symbol. The serpent represents the sun god of the, it's a universal symbol for the sun worldwide. And here it is again. It's not the only one that I found at all the sites in Australia. I've got about, must be close on 50 megalithic sites I know, and this is a carved stone head. At the end of that, it should be around the other way, I've got mouth, nose and eyes. It's about 10 foot in length, and about 8 foot high and 6 foot across. We have all the stones in the Blue Mountains mentioned in Mysterious Australia. Incidentally, all this is from my book, and the next one will be packed with photos. That altar stone, looking down on it, is shaped like a serpent. The next one shows, and it's about 6 foot in length, 4 foot high, and we've got next to it a stone with a groove for a knife. Maybe human sacrifices were carried out, we don't know, but the next slide shows an eagle. Well, it shows a large rock. These are on the Blue Mountains. They're one of about a dozen such structures. Now, you have to climb up the top of that skull-like rock, and you find you're standing on the tail of, next slide please, an eagle with an extended wing. And I've just recently found inscriptions on here, which I'm translating at the moment. I find these people developed in later times, probably in the last 10,000 years or so, a written script. That which survives on stone seems to be something between the Indus Valley, Phoenician, Celtic, Ogham-type script, which I've been, over 20 years of hard effort, been able to translate. And this will all come out in my book. We also find pyramids built by these people. In this case, a mountain about 1,200 foot high in the Upper Hunter. It's still got to be properly measured around the base, but it's enormous. And it's been, what's the word for a pyramid that goes up and then across like this? What's the geometric name for that? Anyway, it's been modified. Large blocks have been pushed out of the way where they're obstructing, and it is apparently littered with astronomical symbols. Next slide. And there it is again. I was up there in recent months, and I've got some photos of Ogham-type script which has astronomical meanings, which I'm going to hear in the next slot. We could go on for hours with the number of carvings I've got from there. That almost looks Egyptian with an eye of, well, Ra or even Bel. The eye of Bel of the Celts was similar. I believe these ideas spread from Australia. We have a 30-foot wide stone circle up in the Armidale area. And the rocks are that ancient, they're breaking away, flaking, but next slide will show you on the southern side a carved head, which should be around the other way. Damn, I'm sorry. But a gruesome sort of chap with a high forehead, eyes, nose, mouth towards the base, and if he was dug out, he'd be about 8 foot in height. He faced the east, but he's laying on his back now. All the carved heads throughout Australia face east. All the eagle and serpent altars, which will signify the sun. The serpent is the sun god, the eagle represents his flight aspect. These all face east. This altar stone, which is found near that stone circle, faces east, and it's the first eagle altar I've found off the Blue Mountains. I believe another one's up in Papua New Guinea. And we have a symbol here which I've been able to translate, and it's going to be compared with some others on the Blue Mountains. and by the time I'm finished, I think I'll have some information. This little fellow was found recently. He's back to the front. I'm terrible. But we've got a small hand and leg here and an enlarged head. Now, he's only partly intact. Next slide shows that he's got the left side broken off, and he's got, well, actually I found half an eye here, but he's got a complete nose, one eye there, and of course the mouth half intact. Well, I don't know what this little deity is, but he was within 500 yards of that stone circle, and I kicked him out of the ground almost, about 3 weeks ago. In the same area we have carved stone heads that look almost Amerindian, don't they? This one particularly. And the next slide shows we have all the stones which are big enough to lay a human body. There's a groove for it, and there's a libation bowl. Next slide shows the libation bowl. Now, these are only a few of the hundreds of relics I've found. In one case, I found a stone. You just saw the inscription. It says, "Mourn King Namu," if my translations are correct. Mourn King Namu. 3 miles away, I found this stone, a huge granite formation, 100 foot in length and 36 foot high. Now, from another angle, next slide, he's actually back to front again, but he's a huge phallic symbol almost. And there are 2 inhumation sites, one there and another further along. Now, the next slide, you'll see you've got the close-up. Some of it's fallen away, but it was sealed at both ends. And granite doesn't preserve human remains. However, it has preserved some carvings which say, "The tomb of Namu, mourn and gather here." 3 miles away, we've got the bloke's tomb. Now, these primitive Celtic Indus Valley type symbols, I believe is the mother script of this race, are found at other sites in this area, but we've got a small inhumation site that could have had a child in it. Now, next one. That's it again. Now, in New Guinea, there are megalithic sites. These date to 1936. Well, I found them. They're in the Daily Telegraph. And you can see they're much the same as the ones that David showed yesterday. Next slide will show some interesting ones. We've got the usual blocks fitted close together. This is in the Eastern Sea Pit. And the next slide shows a huge upright similar to the one I just showed you from out at Bathurst. In New England, we have hundreds of these structures to be discovered yet. And on Bruce Cathey's World Grid, they line up with others in the Flinders Ranges, which I recently discovered. Now, this is a carved head almost in Mayan. Comes from Campbelltown. It was accidentally dug up by workmen in 1972. Sydney University looked at it and said, "Rebury it. It's nothing important." It is now under a park where it was found. Rebury it, nothing important. So next slide, or next box, was it? Yeah. Now, the fact is, we've been told next to nothing about our ancient past. We're told about Captain Cook and the Dutch, and of course the Portuguese and Spanish were here before then. My book will tell you dates and ancient quotes galore, well, my next book certainly will, on Egyptian, Phoenician, Greek and other people who wrote about Australia. In Mysterious Australia, I've got this also, and there's a chapter on the myriad of Chinese information, which will be expanded on the next book, and it will tell you references to kangaroos collected here and taken back to China. They knew about our koala. They call it an animal that played dead in trees if you went to touch it. They knew about the echidna. They knew about the woolly wombat. And even the Persians have reference to these. You know, there's references in Rome that could imply kangaroos were brought back to the Colosseum as a circus item. And there's references to people like the Roman centurion Marcellus Gallus, 64 AD. He was sent out by the Roman governor of Egypt to look for new trading colonies or trading areas below Osio, Malaya. He disappeared for 5 years and came back with one ship. Some of them, one or two had been sunk, and the others went off to trade off their goods with lands that they knew, but the expedition had broken up. He said, had landed on a strange land. where the fierce black people hurled a spear further than any Roman with the aid of a stick. He also described a returning boomerang and a large animal as big as a man that sat on its hind legs and tail and moved by jumping. The Greeks called them satyrs, red-furred satyrs that leapt about the country in herds and carried their young in pouches, in one ancient reference. As late as the 12th century, we find the Viking or Scandinavian scholars and even Irish and Welsh monks writing about the Southern Hemisphere. The not so dark ages where a lot of knowledge was suppressed was actually hidden. And if it wasn't for a lot of monks writing about ancient or recording, preserving ancient writings, a lot would be lost. They describe a creature that stands at the mouth of hell. And it's a monster that has a pouch attached to its chest. And all the souls marching one behind the other down to hell, he plucks off the ones that are meant for purgatory and puts them in his pouch to take him to purgatory. Isn't that nice? Now that's a jarbled Irish monk's idea of a kangaroo, perhaps. He heard third or fourth hand from mariners, no doubt, and this is what would happen. Phoenicians and Egyptians coming down here in the Bronze Age, looking for minerals, have established lengthy colonies that show that Australia was mined and settled for so long in some cases, like the Gympie site, and I believe in the Gosford area, that they had to set up local ruling classes. We have references to we're having trouble with the slides. Yeah. The ruling classes here are referred to in a lot of inscriptions. I found a lot of Celtic rocks. My museum at Tamworth has 126 stones laying around the wall. They're that large. Slabs of rock with inscriptions in Celtic, Phoenician, Libyan and Egyptian of Bronze Age period. That's what, 2000 BC to about 1400, after which the Hittites invented iron. In fact, Ophir, the land of the south of the Phoenicians, was land of iron. It's mentioned in the Bible as Sinim, the queen of the south. The Egyptians called this Kentiamenti, the land of the gods, situated far across the Erythraean Sea of the Greeks, the Erythraean being the Indian Ocean, and it was the land of origin of their ancestors. And so all these ancient peoples in later dynasties and in the time of the Bronze Age, because of this race memory that had been brought across through Europe by the megalithic people and passed down through the ages, were actually sailing in search of their land of origin, and really they'd come full circle. Captain Cook did that. He was the last man to discover Australia. And later I'll write a very interesting story about an Irishman who beat him in 1154 called Sir Owain Miles. And I've got quite a lot of information on him. I've written away for ancient manuscripts, and all this will be in my next book. I've got a lot of evidence that will show the dark ages of Europe were quite familiar with Australia. The Chinese were. In fact, in South America we have evidence of the Mayans, for example. They believed in a land called Culhuacan across the Pacific Ocean, a land of gold. But to get there you have to pass through two other islands of gold. They could have been North and South Island New Zealand, according to some researchers. But certainly Inca, Mayan and other artefacts and some inscriptions have been found in Queensland, New Guinea, up and through Southeast Asia, and I will argue, for example, the Gympie Pyramid from the air. If you look sideways, this is how the Gympie Pyramid looked before the religious fanatics, the Vandals, and the university people got on it and destroyed it. Oh, well, it's not entirely destroyed. If you can get through the 6 or 8 foot plummet of grass, you can see there's still terraces. But it was a 60 metre high, 200 foot tall structure, I should say, 18 terraces, 4 foot high, 8 foot across, 4-sided, and it had a causeway jutting out from the hill to it, because it stood on the edge of a harbour that from Tin Can Bay into Gympie, 36 miles, came in and it actually went in 36 miles from the Tin Can Bay into Gympie, which was then a collection of islands. We're talking about 5,000 years ago, because this is the type of pyramidal structure in Egypt at that period. And this is at the end of the Copper Age. We're getting into the Bronze. And Gympie, 100 years ago, revealed a lot of things. Open cut mines for copper and tin and gold were found. Precious stones might have been taken there. Certainly the Gympie ape that you saw there is in a local museum now, but it's Thoth in ape form, the form in which he took about 1000 BC, after which he was depicted as an ibis-headed human body deity who recorded the judgment of the souls Nementi, the afterworld. And now a Japanese gold mine at Mergen is serviced by a railway line along the west base of that. I found something at the west base, thank goodness, years before this happened. Next slide will show there's houses built around that now. Oh, here he is again. The symbol in between the legs is the papyrus flower, which was Thoth's symbol as the god of writing. Now, next slide. There's the Gympie pyramid as it looked from some distance, a hill covered in trees, some of them over 400 years old, growing up through the masonry. And a number of relics have been found here, which are in my museum. I can prove my case that this really was an Egyptian pyramid. Forget what the university people up there said 20 years ago and kicked myself and everybody else off the site. If they said it was nothing, why did they seal the place off and bring in an army of people with metal detectors, students and professors, and nobody could get on it? The farmer was eventually pushed off his own property and forced to sell out and move. And then houses were built on the site. They told the local council, it's nothing, it's just an old grape vineyard. Well, some of these stones, these are terraces, what's left of them, it was just crude. It served the temporary religious or astronomical purpose, in this case, of the moment, because it was an astronomical structure. Next slide. One of the terraces still in existence. And the rock comes from about 5 miles away, I might add. There's no other rock in that area. Next slide will show some of the enormous boulders we've got at the top 4 terraces, weighing 2 to 4 tonnes apiece. There's bigger ones. And of course, given earth movement, trees growing up, they're being tumbled away a bit, but they still retain. At an angle, you can still see the terracing here. These still survive. The houses can't move them, and nobody can. And next slide, we have the remains of a libation bowl that was cracked with age and is now being totally destroyed and thrown away by vandals. The next slide, that's that wall again. It was about 1,500 foot in circumference. Next slide. Next slide. These 2 top slabs cap the structure. They weigh about 8 tonnes apiece. They're buried under a lot of dirt. And because of the drought, a couple of years ago I was up there, wind and erosion had exposed a small rock where there used to be an altar stone. This altar stone had been smashed and thrown down the side of the embankment by a religious fanatic from a funny mob that knock on your door every day except on Saturdays. Now, I get a lot of them. Now, the next slide shows at the bottom of the west base a smelter. Nodules of smelted bronze were found, excavated at the bottom of that, and was just passed off as an Aboriginal campfire. There's also a spoon made of an unknown bronze alloy, an ancient ladle, I should say, that I've got in the museum, and that was found in the vicinity of the site. Now, next slide. Base of the west side of the pyramid where the railway now runs, I found this sticking up out of the ground head first. I believe it's the god Thoth again, a household deity, a small image for the common folk to use. He's clutching the tower or cross of life. Similar rough stone idols have been found in Egypt, I might add, and even in a Welsh tin mining, an old Phoenician tin mining site in Wales some years ago, an identical Thoth statue similar to the other one you saw there. Now the next one. This is the stone I found protruding up out of the ground next to where the altar used to be. It says, leave offerings of fruit at this stone for the god. It's in Egyptian hieratic script. Next slide. Now, we have another stone I just found recently. It refers to a pharaoh, and I'll save his name for my book. It says, Pharaoh John Smith of the Sun, ruler of this land, worships Ra. By his command, this is the place of assembly to worship the sun god. Next slide. I photographed him on all 4 sides. These carvings, to me, prove I was on the right track, and that these these carvings and the structure were definitely the work of ancient mineral-seeking Middle East colonists, probably a joint Phoenician-Egyptian expedition here. Now, next slide. Same again, another angle. I've had to, sometimes you find carvings all over the rocks and you've got to go around and about to get them to translate them. Now, the next slide is from Toowoomba. This is a carving that says, "This ship sailing to Hadar, named Waihati, Ra protect us." It's a stone, the title would be left at a shrine, a votive offering stone. And in the area there are stones referring to a shrine of Tanith. Tanith was the Phoenician Earth Mother goddess. Now, there's some 47 stones from this Toowoomba location, and here's another one. Hanab. That's the other side of that stone. Yes, that's the side of it where it says Ra. Now, the next stone, this was in two pieces and 60 foot apart. One half that was in thick scrub, and the other was sticking up out of a field when I found it. Hanab. It's carved on both sides. Hanab, son of Hulag the Elder, erected an idol of Baal and made a personal sacrifice of an animal for a safe voyage to the sun god at the temple. And the next slide should show the other side of it. Then we have another Toowoomba stone. Toowoomba, I believe, was a major mining colony, probably connected with the one at Gympie. Guard the shrine of Yahweh's word, God of gods. That's this stone up the top. I've accidentally put it upside down, but that's the front. He's carved on the back as well. And this one was found the next day. These are only 2 years old. These were the two stones that led me to find the other 47 at that site. And there are the remains of an open-air shrine, I might add, huge blocks of stone. Now, we've got here this other stone which says Baal, the sun god, at the temple of the sun. Oh, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Guard the shrine of Yahweh's word, God of gods. That's right. Now, the next stone will show that we've got here Baal, the sun god. Oh, that's the back of those stones again, sorry. So they're carved on both sides. Here's an image that could represent Baal. It comes from Moree, where another 40 or so stones have been found by me and removed before they've been destroyed. There at the museum now. This one says Baal, the sun god, at the temple of the sun performed rituals. On the back you'll see the symbols. The next is that's what you call a direction stone. It was placed near a shrine telling you which direction to take. Now, next one. I know this off by heart. Ship sailed under the protection of Ra to Dan. Dan was a famous Phoenician trading colony in Canaan, which is now part of modern Israel in Bronze Age times. And it means they're sailing to Dan from Australia, not coming here, which is what a lot of inscriptions say. Now the next one, Mot the sun rules the length of the seasons, once again from Moree. Mot the sun rules the length of the seasons. And the next one says, go to the White Temple. The White Temple meaning the White Goddess, the Earth Mother of the Phoenicians. This is Phoenician script, I might add. So that's different to the megalithic script. Now, at Tamworth, my own backyard virtually, other things have been found, but Tamworth's full of copper and gold and tin. And wherever you find these inscriptions in Australia, why, there's always large deposits of tin and copper or whatever. So these people were here probably bringing oxen from Southeast Asia to mine the stuff and carry it over large distances to smelting somewhere and then taking back to Southeast Asian bases and perhaps even knocking it into materials and shipping back to Egypt. Now, we've got two upside down heads. I'm sorry I did this. These were found at Moree, or actually this one here was found at Moree and the other one at Plainlands recently near Ipswich. The area in southern Queensland is revealing a lot now. Now the next slide, let that go, we've got another one which is interesting. It comes from Tamworth and it says, from Hadar to this land of the morning sun, I Harwell claim, and on the back, next slide, this place of buried orichalcum. which was probably copper. Down the road is a place called Timbunburai, which is actually has a very large copper deposit. There's another one here from Tamworth, and this one from Hadar to the this place, the land called Kohar, the land of the sun, belongs to Rata. Next slide. Now, you've all heard of the Egyptian hieroglyphs in the Gosford area. Well, I've only got 3 slides here. We can run through these. It will show you that the area was probably a major base of operations for sale elsewhere in search of minerals. And I'm still translating these at the moment. Next slide. Once again, you've all seen them in Nexus. Next slide. Next slide. I found these on the Hawkesbury River years ago. It's the bird-headed deity Horus with a surmounting sun disk with escaping serpents emanating from the disk. Now, that's one of a number. Another one actually is a Phoenician-type trireme vessel carved in a rock. I left that out. Now, the next slide. That, incidentally, is near those other carvings. This is a 4-foot-wide sun disk. I found that in 1970 in the same region. And further up the Hawkesbury, there's been things like a 2,500-year-old Egyptian axe blade found, and other inscriptions on the lower Blue Mountains. Now, next slide, probably the last. You've seen this in my book, or you will if you buy it. I will autograph copies. We have here 2 heads were found in 1974 by a farmer ploughing up what turned out to be an ancient inlet of the Hawkesbury River, which had been silted up for a couple of thousand years. It once sat on a sandstone base, like the Gympie 8 did in fact, but had been ploughed out of the ground by a farmer and destroyed before he knew it. These were kept as garden ornaments for a few years until the farmer read an article of mine in the Hawkesbury Advocate Courier and wrote to me and said, I've got 2 carved heads you might be interested in. They've been carved from opal rock. The smaller one is identical to depictions of the Earth Mother Goddess Demeter and the taller one, Mithras. Now, these cults were introduced into Egypt by the Phoenicians as early as maybe 800 BC. It means that these Middle East peoples, and I recently found a large wall almost the length of that near the Egyptian glyphs, with a couple of kilometres, just Phoenician symbols carved into it. I've got a long job translating that. But these are up the river at North Richmond, and it means that they must have sailed up the Hawkesbury and the Nepean, had a look around in the time they were there. But there's no minerals, so they would have sailed on elsewhere. But I think the Gosford area, Brisbane waters, is perfect for ancient triremes and like, and they would have used that as a base. Now, these heads have been carved from local rock, being used for temporary religious purposes while they're here, and being left when they sailed away, and the Aborigines probably found them and tossed them around, or they just were gradually buried. But it's incredible. I've got more and more of this. I started when I was 14 years old doing this. I'm 52 now, and I'm still going. And I've got that much material. It is now time for me to put it into a book. I think I was meant to wait this long. I wasn't prepared to come out with a lot of things until I was sure of translations and like. Now I'm ready to publish. And I think that what I've got is going to really upset Australian history, like certain things in New Zealand are about to. New Zealand's history is definitely in for a shake-up. Even the Maoris admit that. So there's a lot we don't know. All I ask you, this is only my interpretation. Keep an open mind and investigate for yourself. Now, any questions? I'm sorry I put those slides in back to front too. Embarrassing. Yes?
Could you tell us more about nations in Hawkesbury River you've written in the book?
Yes, I have mentioned a bit about it. Those heads were in the book, yes.
Loch Ness monsters.
Oh, yes.
I read your book.
Repeat the question.
Right.
I know.
Could you tell us more about Loch Ness monsters in Hawkesbury River, Sydney, Hawkesbury
Yeah,
River.
good morning.
Thank you.
Yes, it's a sign of age. I don't want to admit that. I'm 25, not 52. Turn the numbers around. I feel better. The Hawkesbury River monster I named some years ago, not to get back at the Scots. I mean, I'm a direct descendant of Robbie Burns myself in my father's family. Don't know which side of the sheep, anyway. The fact is, he got around. But the fact is, Nessie is a worldwide phenomenon. The American documentaries, the British documentaries, always Loch Ness. I am fed up with it. I'm fed up. I don't buy any books anymore. I want to know what's in Australia. Now, this creature has been identified by the Maoris as the Taniwha. He's called the Kuria up in the eastern sea pit. He's a worldwide phenomenon. There have to be deep-sea living plesiosaurids, as well as ones that lived in fresh water. And the creature, the Aborigine called both the Moolewong and the Miriula, meaning giant water serpent, giant lipid serpent sometimes, they have 3,000 or so rock paintings and carvings along the Hawkesbury at places like St Albans that show this creature going long before white man came here. And there have been sightings since the 1800s, probably since the 1790s in the area. The earliest Yowie report dates to January 1789 near Sydney Cove. It's nothing new. Early settlers have been reporting them since the 1820s along the Hawkesbury, and I'd like to write a book on it later because on Australian plesiosaurs generally. I was attacked in the Good Weekend recently. My solid ironstone plesiosaur fossil fossil rock at Lura is described as a heap of rocks by this idiot. If you took a close look, it's a solid mass, not a pile of rocks. And this creature was washed up on the ocean about 120 or more million years ago. Geological uplifts have pushed the Blue Mountains up since then. The Hawkesbury River is a sunken valley, by the way, and this creature's left high and dry. The overcoating of volcanic ash that must have flowed down onto the shoreline and protected it has eaten away to reveal a solid ironstone creature. And the nonsense in that, I might add, about the saying I lied about that chapter in my book about the UFO base under the Blue Mountains is poppycock. I never said any such thing to that man. It was just an attack on the conference. And, well, we know what the press are like. They've actually held a conference just recently in which my name came up about this Hawkesbury monster thing, and the conference was to discuss whether the Australian media had any credibility. Now.
Hello?
Yes?
My late husband, who was an avid yachtsman, spent many, many years on the Hawkesbury, living there and sailing it. And in the 60s, he discovered one night, he was sitting in the cockpit, and this enormous black, slippery thing came out of the water. And he went to get his camera, and that was it. So he told lots of people, and they said, oh, you've had too much gin or something.
This is the trouble.
He went to the museum, and they said they had had other reports, but there was nothing confirmed. They couldn't really add to his.
And this, how long was it ago?
This is in the 60s, about 1963, something like that.
True. I've had reports going back to the 30s, say, when working on the Hawkesbury Bridge, looking down and seeing a long dark plesiosaur-like outline sailing under the bridge, going upriver, and then within about an hour or so coming back again, out to sea. I believe they've been breeding there. See, it was an estuary living creature originally. That's why most of the reports around New Zealand are in the river estuaries. And I'll be investigating while I'm in there. We leave on Tuesday. The wife and I go all over the country, and it's a change to make our fourth trip to New Zealand, look for things. I like to get around. There's so much in our own backyard to investigate. Why do we have to go overseas, look at pyramids, and why don't we look at our own? I mean, My Lost Civilisation, which I'll name in my book, and there'll be a book just about that later. Why have we got to read about other civilizations overseas? We should be studying our own. And one thing about my civilization, you don't need aqualung gear to look for it. So, any more? Yes?
in that area?
Well, I've got a book I'm restructuring on the Yowie at the moment and giant hominids generally, which in...
Rex, will you repeat the question, please?
Sorry?
Will you repeat the question?
Do I know much about the nullivore? Sorry. Yeah. Well, there's been a lot of things seen now. I've mentioned a lot about it in this manuscript I'm still working on about the Yowie mystery Australia-wide. And there's a lot of giant hominids being reported out there. There's a lot of UFO activity. When I write a book on Australian UFOs, which, like all my other work, will be different to everybody else's, and original, I'm an original thinker. I don't copy off other people. I've got too much of my own stuff to go through without reading somebody else's findings. In fact, I haven't even read Paul White's translation of the hieroglyphs gospel yet. I don't want to see anybody's work. I want to do my own translation and then compare it with theirs then and see what I've come up with. And this is how I work. I am an original thinker. I come up with a lot of interesting findings, if I may say so, and for this I've been persecuted for some 30 years now by the scientific establishment. I'm only an amateur. I had a very poor education. I had to teach myself. That's why I find my house is crowded with books. Books, 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 and I don't know where to put them. My wife can verify that. It's obvious that anyone who sticks their neck out and dares to question accepted dogmas is in for a rough time. Now, yes?
I'm just wondering, are Yowie still like a thing in existence in Australia, and what sort of areas in Australia are they like cited?
Actually, I had a slide, must have
Rex,
disappeared.
repeat the question, please.
Yes, what is it again? Yowies.
Still exist in Australia.
Well, I hope the Yowie still exists in Australia. Yes. But does the Yowie still exist in Australia? Talk about male and females in large numbers. Well, small populations, 5 or 6 creatures in a small breeding group, like very primitive hominids usually do. They are primarily confined to the eastern mountain ranges and Tasmania. They're in New Guinea, the Puri, the hairy devil man, the me-tail or ape-man of Malaysia, and all the way up into Asia. You get the same physical description of Bigfoot, the Yeti, the creatures in Malaysia, New Guinea, as you do in Australia and New Zealand. Why? There is a worldwide similarity here. Identical features. There's got to be something to it. Even if the creatures were extinct, there had to have been something to it. They're in Aboriginal folklore going back to the year dot. And they say they were here before them, like the giant hominids were, and the other mystery, normal-sized people. And the Yowie, well, he's all over Australia, whereas he's extinct in some areas now. He had hundreds of different names depending on the different tribal dialects, but in Eastern Australia, in the south, he was called what was it? There was the Goolagar up in the north, and there's another couple of names in Victoria and southern New South Wales, and of course Yowie is primarily the most common name. It means great hairy man, and so do all the other names. So they described them as something different to normal humans. They were animal, and yet they were human almost. They lived on herbivorous, insectivorous food. They didn't make tools. But we think they probably picked up a lump of stick or wood or something to dig with, perhaps. I'm starting to think from as I go along, as I find more information, I think they're developing, much like the chimpanzees in Africa that are picking up rocks and whatever now and hitting one another. Well, it's evident that these creatures think. I do believe they exist. There are small numbers of them. They're very primitive, and worldwide these relict hominids are dying out. But I think as long as we keep those beautiful rainforests there and we don't build on them and we don't pollute the air, we might have some of these mysteries 100 or even 1,000 years from now to go on studying. And I personally believe the creature is there, as I say, but there can't be more than a few hundred left. And I don't know whether I'm exaggerating the figures or not yet, but I believe that a lot of people who are seeing them, and I have plaster casts of footprints hundreds of miles apart which do match up. People that have no knowledge of one another's existence who come to me with a cast or a physical description or something else which matches up with someone else's sighting, saying there might be someone from Tasmania, someone up in Cape York has made the identical description of a creature they saw, male or female, or they've found plaster casts or footprints which they've made casts of which match all these others. Now it's very easy to toss out a fake track, and I've had a lot of people taking me for a joke ring me up, mate, I saw a yowie fair dinkum, he was so big and he ran across the road. Why do most of these sightings of the fakers are always of things running up behind a semi-trailer, ripping the tarpaulin off, or running across the road in front of a car, or they stand there on a track and look at you and run. I found that a lot of these creatures would stand and give you stare for stare. I have quite a lot of reliable reports. Truthful people have made reports over the years. This has been going on since early settlement times, and it hasn't stopped. When you go back to the historic period, which I date from the first fleet virtually to the 1920s or 30s, we find that people were making the same reports as the early settlers. The first report were a group of redcoats south of Sydney Cove in January 89, hunting for food, and they saw 3 large hairy creatures. One appeared to be a woman with long pendulous breasts, possibly about 6 foot. The other 2 were a bit taller, male creatures, and they fired their muskets at them, and they eluded the redcoats and the 5 convicts who were with them in the scrub. Then there was 1790. There was a report up the George's Hall area, up the George River, where 2 redcoats and some settlers apparently fired on a male and female and a small childlike creature. And that was in the Aborigines of the Fairfield district's folklore until early this century. There were, in the 1940s, still old Aborigines that knew that story. We have reports from Hornsby, 1820, there were a couple of sightings there. A soldier fired at a 5-foot tall, hairy male creature that approached him in scrub near what is now Springwood. I've got some 3,000 reports of these things. I've got thousands more of Tasmanian tigers that are supposed to be extinct. One ran in front of me, that's in the book. As far as I'm concerned, these things exist. Yes?
Talking about the rocks now, what's your feeling about Ayers Rock or URU?
Well, I'll tell you this.
Rex, repeat the question, please.
Yes, what is Ayers Rock? What do I think about Ayers Rock? Well, I'll tell you this. The Aztecs, the Mayans, Incas all spoke of the great southern land across the Pacific, in the centre of which was a great red rock. And they referred to this as the navel of the world. The Aborigines referred to it as the navel of the world. So,
I read your book recently, and I thought it was very good, fantastic really.
thank you very much.
But I was coming back from Grafton, my car broke down, and I was kind of on this stretch of road. It's about a quarter of a kilometre between me and my car, and a car in front of, it's about half that distance. Anyway, we saw this dog go across the road. It had some black markings down the back, down near the rear legs. I couldn't tell what it was, but do you think it could be a Tasmanian tiger? What do you think?
Well, was it a Tasmanian tiger you saw? Well, I'd say yes. In fact, males have the stripes running from the mid back down to the tail rump and legs. Females' stripes start at the nape of the neck and run all the way down. So, the creature I saw that's in my book in 1972 was obviously a male, about 5 foot from head to tail, but they're only over 6 feet. And there's been sightings in Tasmania in the early days of much bigger creatures.
Rex, I've got a question.
Yes.
Little people. I've spoken to several people, including park rangers, a couple of Aboriginals, about little people, about 3 foot high, very pale, living underground. What reports have you collected on little people?
Obviously you're asking me what I think of Australian pygmies. Well, not wishing to be called a racist, heaven forbid. I've already denied that the Aborigines are the first people in Australia. The Aborigines even say the Negrito pygmies up in Cape York were there before them. In fact, the pygmy type native was known right down through southern Australia. Of course, they were cut off in Tasmania and died out by late last century. Certainly they were australoids like the Aborigines that were reduced in size through their rainforest environment, and the diet they had. And there may still be some up in the attic, and I will argue, I've had recent reports of natives carrying weapons. They don't seem to use the boomerang, but they seem to use other more primitive weapons. Their stone tool kit was much smaller than the Aborigines. They had a distinctive culture. I've got reports from the Wollongambie wilderness area, and some of the slides I had to take out this morning included slides of an expedition I made there to search, a successful search, to look for the Tasmanian tiger. We found footprints that were an hour old, and they compared to others in Tassie. But as far as pygmies go, there were reports up there of these Negrito-type natives, and an old lady living at Kurrajong back in 1986 told me that her grandmother remembered on this farm at Kurrajong an old man about almost 3.5 foot high coming out periodically on the edge of their property with a spear, and they found him sick once and they nursed him back to health, and he wandered off into the scrub, and weeks later he came back with his family. And they used to come close to the place. He used to be given fruit by the farm and his family, and they'd go off. And one day they found some nice newly made stone tools in gratitude, a handled axe and an old mother. And in my book there's reference to them. In fact, maybe Mysterious Australia 2, when I do it, will have a lot more like this. And don't worry, I've already got that one worked out. My next one will have a lot on UFOs, including secret wartime activities in Australia by the Japanese, and a lot of very interesting UFO material I've been saving. In fact, the Vikings will probably have a big chapter in that too, because they were here. In fact, they've left Scandinavian organ on the Hawkesbury. Everybody sailed at Hawkesbury, even the Chinese. There's 2,000-year-old carvings there. And here's Captain Cook coming to Botany Bay, Italy's first. I saw a cartoon once of Cook planting the flag and a bloke in a Spanish helmet tapping him on the shoulder. I thought that was in the 1970 about Cook's great discovery, yes.
Research on avoid being buried by the scientific the academic establishment. Your theories so acceptable to them. I mean, how are you going to get all this stuff across?
How am I going to get all this evidence across to the scientific establishment?
Well, yeah,
with difficulty, but it is burying them. They are protesting. It doesn't exist. It doesn't exist. They're gradually being buried as the Titanic is sinking. It's unsinkable, you know. Our theories cannot be questioned, you know. We're Doctor and Professor so-and-so. Who are you? An amateur, archaeologist, amateur, whatever, who used to swing a pick on the local council for a living. And you're nothing. You're just dirt. I've had all sorts of insults over the phone, through the mail, attacked on the radio recently, and even lied to get me on a program and then have these academics waiting online to rubbish you. And the fact is, I let them go ahead. I play the role of the struggling young researcher who's got really, he's got fresh thinking, he's got fresh ideas, and he's able to Thank you. These spectacled old fellows might as well be with dust coats on and cobwebs all over them. That's the image I let them. I let them have that image. I let them look like learned professors with cobwebs on them, because the public then ring me up after the show and say how much they enjoyed what I was saying. And so it's really having a detrimental effect to them. If they'd shut up and let people like ourselves express our ideas, everything would be all right. They wouldn't be made fools of. Eventually they will be made to look out of date and foolish. It's already happening. There are fossils that get discovered and then buried because they don't want to let them be known, because it questions everything they've taught for years. It's incredible. A little bone about the size of this, a very primitive mammal jaw, has been found up in the Gulf country in Queensland. And because it might just open the way to a separate hominid evolution if creatures evolved far enough in Australia, this has been buried because it could. It could prove another theory of mine that maybe, just based on footprints at the moment, it may be that we did have a separate hominid evolution in Australia. Certainly looks like there was one in China, and that if the land bridges, as I say, were there, these creatures could have spread to Africa in one line and Australia in the other. It may be that not just Homo erectus evolved into Homo sapiens here first, it might be that it was the other way around. And I'd like to think Australia, I know the Aborigines say that some of these giants rose up out of the earth in Victoria. In other words, they evolved in Victoria and spread northwards. They have tales of normal human type people migrating northwards. They talk about some of these creatures walking down from Indonesia into Australia, not sailing. How would a 4 metre or 8 metre giant make a boat? Up in Rockhampton there are massive tools, maybe almost twice the size of that 40-pound chopper. And the Aborigines say it was made by a creature called the Kalkadoon. There's an Aboriginal tribe called that too, but the Kalkadoon was a massive creature about, we'd say, about 25 foot tall in their folklore, but the scientists say rubbish, no such creatures, and they tell the Aborigines their history. The Maoris are told their history by the experts, but they don't want to hear from the people themselves. And shouldn't the Aborigines know their history? Do they have to be told? This is the way they act. But I do not believe, in the end, that I'm going to win every academic's approval. But a lot of them are grudgingly saying I'm on the right track, but they prefer to sit on the fence until more evidence is forthcoming. Then they'll come out and support me. And then, of course, say, actually, we knew about this all along, and take full credit for the whole thing most graciously. Yes.
Have you heard anything on like native panthers? There's been quite a few sightings in our area in WA.
Oh, yes.
Some of our neighbours, one neighbour in particular, he had an Alsatian dog and he's working out at night on his tractor, and his Alsatian just took off. He just took off in the dark. He didn't stay around. And our neighbour actually walked backwards to his house. His hair's on his head, just stood up. He had shot a roo earlier in the afternoon down by his dam. The next morning he went down to get the roo for his dog meat. The roo wasn't there, he found it over his back fence with the head even. But the paw marks around the dam were absolutely enormous. And quite a few
I have plaster casts of this creature. Yes, question about the panther. Well, they're a nationwide thing, and as far as I'm concerned, they're a marsupial cat, a giant marsupial cat, and they're a still living survival of the marsupial lion, Thylacoleo carnifex, which died out officially about 18,000, or some say 12,000 years ago. Many of these so-called panthers look, well, they always look dog yet cat-like, but many of them have been reported carrying pouched young, and the pouch faces the rear end, which protects the young as the mother's running through low-lying bracken, which is identical to the Tasmanian tiger or thylacine. It has a reverse pouch. We have some unique animals in this country. We have 12-foot tall kangaroos. Imagine one of them hopping 60 feet in one leap. They've all been extinct since the Ice Age. There was a slide there too I could have used of the 30-foot monitor lizards that are mentioned in my book. I have got a plaster cast from Maria Heather and I investigated years ago. It had crossed a field that a fellow had ploughed, and he put a bucket over one of them and a bit of grass over the others, and of course it poured rain the next day. By the time we got down a week later, at least the tin can was still there, and I got one perfect foot. Plaster casts are not physical proof, admittedly, but as far as I'm concerned, when you've got enough of this evidence on the yowie or any creature, there's good circumstantial evidence to say that there is need for a proper, unbiased scientific investigation and assessment of the evidence. I have not been given this. I've got 126 rock inscriptions up at the museum at Tamworth, Phoenician, Egyptian, Celtic, Ogden, whatever, and not one academic will look at it. I've got relics down in Australia that support my pre-Dutch discovery views. I've got my mega tools, I've got my dawn tools, I've got Homo erectus type stone tools. No academic will look at them and give me a scientific assessment. Why? And yet they rubbish me in the press and say there's no evidence for it. It doesn't exist. Well, they need glasses. Why don't they come up there? One academic was told there was a body rotting away up in Emmaville, a hominid, up in the scrub. A fellow got an academic from Sydney Museum. He went up there by car, this is going back about 20 years, and when the man found he'd have to take a horse up into the wilderness to look at this body, so rubbish. He said, I'm not going to go up on a horse in the scrub. He said, that's not my way. You know, he was well dressed sort of fellow. Didn't want to get his shoes dirty, but he went back to Sydney and he wrote a learned report saying that it had proven to be nothing. Hadn't even seen it. These are the sort of people I'm dealing with, and I know how to deal with them. The fact is, they cannot keep an open mind. Some scientific stance, when they can't keep an open mind and look at the evidence that I've got and give me an unbiased assessment. Okay, say I'm wrong. At least they had a chance to look at the evidence. I want that opportunity to prove my arguments.
We've got to finish right now for lunch. Lunch is for
Ladies first, hang on.
Breaks.
Eric von Däniken's hypothesis will have an increasing effect on society, science, literature, and art. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence is a concern that affects all of humanity.
For me, it's like souvenirs of the past. Some of our human forefathers had contact with extraterrestrials. They were here, they visited us, they were in contact. Something happened in the deep past and it will happen again in the future.
The author of the sensational international bestseller and the most compelling non-fiction publication of all time is back in London for the first time in 25 years to celebrate Chariots of the Gods' 50th anniversary. Eric von Däniken Legacy Night. In this 2-hour special, you are invited to share with Eric his most influential discoveries and revelations. Learn about his incredible life journey as an author and researcher. Meet the team behind the highly anticipated Chariots of the Gods 360-degree entertainment franchise. Eric von Däniken Legacy Night, live streamed from the Princess Anne Theatre, BAFTA 195, Piccadilly, London, October 15th, 2016. For more information and to purchase tickets, please visit zoharstargate.com.
Monsters that have been reported for generations there. There's similar creatures in New Guinea. And when you compare all the descriptions of our Aboriginal people, of the plesiosaur type creatures, the woolly wonk as they call them in the Hawkes River, with the New Zealand Tanifar, the career of New Guinea, you find they're all one and the same creature. I think this is better. And this is the same with our Maui hound man beast in New Zealand. Now, how would they get a man-like creature similar to our yowie in New Zealand? Well, this is because there was a land bridge during early Ice Age times from mainland Asia going through what is now the islands of Southeast Asia, joining New Guinea, Australia, and an offshoot of that went down through the islands of the West Pacific into New Zealand. Maori folklore talks about the lost land of Wangaroa, and that the various tribes on the different islands used to walk to visit one another rather than take boats. And the sea rose gradually and submerged this great landmass. Here we perhaps have Mu. But in any case, I believe this land bridge was used in early Pleistocene times by the most primitive hominids to migrate on foot gradually down into Australia and down into New Zealand, because there have been found fossilised footprints of both giant-sized and normal-sized hominids similar to those found in Australia. There are also dawn tools and even giant ore. They all have traditions in ancient Greece, Rome, Egypt, Sumeria, even in the Amerindian cultures of a vast continent in the southern hemisphere, with variations, basically the motherland, the land where the first men and women arose. The Sumerians said the first people who came up to Sumeria came up from a southern land to establish the civilization of Earth. And I believe I have found that civilization. because I believe that there is a lost megalithic civilization in Australia and that it predates any other. The relics I've found here are much older than anything in Europe. For example, Stonehenge is only 5,000 years old. As you go back through Eastern Europe into Asia, you find the megaliths getting older, and into Southeast Asia, and then down into New Guinea where they're about 10,000 or so years old. But in Australia, they're over 15, maybe 20,000 years old. Now, I believe that these people may have even started to develop metallurgy by the time they were migrating out of Australia. Many stayed here, of course. And those that left here gradually spread up into Asia and across into Europe, where they're called Cro-Magnon man. Now, this early Stone Age people, who were they? We see here, and you might have seen earlier, a skull, two skulls. The larger of the two is this one. It's what we call an endocast, as is the next one followed. The endocasts are caused by mud filling skulls, dinosaur, man, whatever, and fossilising. Sometimes the bone material just disintegrates and falls away, or it becomes mineralised with the rest of it. According to Australian Museum findings years ago, endocasts can be up to 250,000 years old. Oh. Ladies and gentlemen, well, as Don's just said, I published a book called Mysterious Australia, and I wrote it really to show the average Australian that we have just as many wonderful unexplained phenomena, mysteries, mysterious archaeological evidence, and whatever in this country as they have overseas. All the literature over the years has been on what's found in America or Europe, Stonehenge, Easter Island, and ad infinitum, Loch Ness monsters, Bigfoot. But how many people have heard of the Australian Bigfoot, the Yowie, or the Australian Nessie, the Hawkesbury River monster, among other things? I've actually spent a lifetime investigating unknown animals in this country. And my wife, Heather, and I go all over the country regularly looking for things. And we're just about to make our fourth field expedition to New Zealand in search of evidence of pre-Maori civilization contacts. While I'm there, I'm to be shown pyramidal structures and other megalithic monuments by a group of Maori Tohungas, and other people have found things which have reported to me. We'll also be searching for sighting reports of the moa. And the moa, well, in this case, a small scrub moa. The larger ones are extinct. And also the so-called moihau, a man-like creature in Maori folklore, which early European settlers claim to have sighted. And of course, the taniwha, the Maori plesiosaur type stone megatools, similar to those found in Australia, which I believe could only have been left there by people who were able to enter the country on foot at a very remote period. And I'll be investigating reports of this unknown Stone Age history of New Zealand while I'm there. I've spent a lifetime, as I say, and in this I've found an enormous collection of different relics and rock inscriptions, footprints of various animals like the Tasmanian tiger. And people often ask me why I find these things. How do we find them? I seem to have a spirit guide, perhaps. I don't know, but I'll be driving along the road and I'll say, pull up, there's something over there in the bush. And I'll go over there and I might come back with a rare butterfly, moth, beetle. It might be a fossil. It might be I find a fossil footprint, or I might find a rock inscription. Haven't caught a yowie yet. But the fact is, I always come back to the car with something. So it's uncanny. But I seem to have, as I say, someone or something guiding me to all these discoveries. Now, I have come in for a lot of criticism over the years, and lately it's gotten really violent, you might say, with certain academic people who are trying to discredit me because I'm stepping on toes. I'm saying, for example, that the Australian Aborigines were not the first Stone Age inhabitants of Australia. That is not politically correct. Unfortunately, I have found evidence which suggests that this is so, that we have a Stone Age history comparable to that of mainland Asia, perhaps even Africa. Now, Australia had been known to all the ancient civilizations. Why? These two skulls are of two distinct racial types. The larger one is what we call the Soloon man, and the smaller one, Wajak man. Homo erectus entered Australia at some stage, according to Dr. Jeremy Chirps of Oxford University, an anthropologist, and evolved into modern man here, or the Soloon man as he's called. At a later date, the Wajaks, an offshoot of the Peking group, came down here, found the Solo people here, and interbred with them to produce the Australian Aborigine by about 60,000 or so years ago. Now, I believe it was the Solo people, the first modern man, the earliest we know, who created the Australian megalithic culture and spread it out across the earth together with its associated agricultural science, or astronomically associated agricultural science, and certainly the beginnings of religion in the form of the Earth Mother and Sky Father cults. Now, here we have one of my latest discoveries from Benderby, an endocast of a Homo erectus type skull. Given that it's been crushed by geological pressure, you can see pressure marks in it. That's a front showing a pointed sagittal crest, but the skull was out a little more. Now, the next slide should show the sagittal crest looking down on it, and in profile we have well, we saw a profile shot earlier. Here it is in that slide. You would have seen the three skull types. This is what they are when they're reconstructed. Admittedly, the others are distorted through geological pressures in the ground, but I believe they're well over 250,000 years old. The top one, Soloon man, with the hasn't got the same amount of receding forehead as the more primitive Wajak people, who are closer to Java man and Peking.